Hey, what's up, guys? I hope you're enjoying the Be the Difference podcast. If you are, I got a huge favor to ask. Go on to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review for us. It helps us immensely with algorithms and growth because we grow completely by word of mouth, organically. That's why there are no ads. Also, feel free to share this content with somebody you think might get value out of it. Last, if you don't know, I also do coaching to help people become the best version of themselves, starting with physical fitness, going all the way through mindset, sales, and leadership. If you're interested in learning more, there's going to be a link in the description of the podcast. You can schedule a time. It's a free assessment. All I'm going to do is have a conversation with you and see if I can even help you. I look forward to speaking to all of you. Continue to enjoy the podcast, and remember to always be the difference. What's up, everybody? It's Greg Birch with Delta Financial, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring on guest speakers. Today, I've got the honor and pleasure of welcoming Dr. Andy Neillie. Did I pronounce that right?
You got it.
Man, we didn't even practice that ahead of time.
Practice that.
That was a straight guess. I'm getting better at that. I don't like it's like a feel, like an instinct, you know. Anywho, Andy, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. Glad to be here. Looking forward to having a good, rich conversation about personal and professional leadership stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And you know how much I love, for the audience, you know how much I love talking about some leadership stuff. So before we get into it, though, if you don't know Dr. Andy Neillie, he is a speaker. Hold on, let me pull this up. It looks like Dr. Andy Neillie speaks, trains, and leads teams that have characterized the past 20 years of his career. He currently works as a keynote speaker, corporate trainer, coach, and consultant. He travels weekly to present workshops on leadership and sales-related topics for numerous Fortune 500 firms, as well as small and mid-sized companies, trade groups, and associations. By combining his background in management and sales with a strong speaking and training abilities, he's able to motivate clients and audiences to take action that benefit them and their organizations. Perhaps just as importantly, he's passionate about the personal side of leadership as well, and writes and speaks regularly about building trust as a leader. In addition to teaching leadership principles for Concordia University's MBA program, he published his first book, The Golden Principles: Life and Leadership Lessons from a Rescued Dog, which uses simple lessons learned from a golden retriever about living well and leading well. In 2015, The Golden Principles was honored by Amazon.com with a Top 100 Best Books of the Year award. Clients hire Andy to help them develop their leadership because he owns several businesses, manages a team of key leaders, and owns ultimate P&L responsibility for several $1 million of annual revenues. He's managed an operational team as well as a sales team and has spent more than 15 years honing his craft as a keynote speaker and workshop facilitator on all things pertaining to leadership and sales. He reads more than 50 books a year and finds deep satisfaction in bringing current insights to bear for leaders and their teams. Welcome to the show, Mr. Andy Neillie.
Somebody wrote that copy and you read it very well, Greg.
I appreciate that. I'm getting good at reading people's bio. So good. Yeah. So one of the things that and we can jump right in, it's up to you, but one of the things that you put on here was that the 4 leadership necessities, and kind of breaking down. I give a precursor to how you even came up with this, how this came to you and how you developed them, and then break them down, and we can kind of jump in and break them out for the audience, each of them.
Well, Greg, first of all, real privilege to be with you. I got a fellow leadership junkie at the other end of this podcast, so we're going to have some good conversations around it. I've been looking at folks like you for more than 25 years now. As my bio mentioned, I've got a doctorate in leadership development. I've got 5 million frequent flyer miles on American Airlines, from jetting all over the world, working with management teams and leaders. And in addition, I've owned several small businesses here in Central Texas for the last dozen years, where I manage a team of managers. I've been thinking about what makes a manager a high-performing leader for a long time. Now, here's the thing that you, with your strong military background and all the thinking you've done about leadership and all of the writing and the reading and the speaking and the training you've done in that area that I've done in their area, if you and I are being perfectly honest with our audience today, there's really been nothing new about leadership since Marcus Aurelius and Jesus Christ. The last 25 years kind of stamped it all in. We all have our own voices around personal and organizational leadership. But as I looked at what am I seeing when I'm working with good leaders, what are the consistent themes? I recognize the top performing leaders that I was working with, whether they were a small business owner owning an insurance agency or an HVAC agency or a retail business, or whether they were an enterprise leader inside a major corporation. I recognized there were some common themes, and I started asking about those themes and looking at them and thinking about them, and realized probably 3 or 4 years ago, the best leaders I work with bring 4 things to the table consistently. Hence the title of my work and the title of my next book, Greg, The 4 Leadership Necessities. And so it's really been a 25-year process of thinking about nothing new in leadership, but in the midst of the thousands of books that are written on leadership every decade, and in the midst of the hundreds of podcasts that go up probably weekly, can we simplify it? And as you and I are going to talk about with your audience, we both can share, leadership isn't easy. I'm never going to say it's easy, but having a grid around these 4 leadership necessities is a simple framework for a manager, a team lead, a director, a supervisor to know, am I not just managing, but am I becoming a high-performing leader? And so we'll talk about those as we dive into them. Their conviction, competence, character, and covenant. And I'd love to go into each one of those with your followers as we move forward in our conversations. How's that sound?
I love it. Let's do it.
Good.
Let's like get in the nitty gritty of each one, you know?
Yeah. Well, so I'd be glad to. And actually 3 of the 4 of them I came to relatively quickly and easily as I was working with good leaders and observing good leaders lead their teams. The first one, this whole area of conviction, Greg, and I've been on some of your training, and I know you talk about strategy, perceptiveness, thinking about the future. In trying to find an easy way for me to capture all of that, I used 4 C's, and the first one is the C of conviction. A team member is responsible for thinking about today and tomorrow. They may be thinking about next week. They might be thinking about next month, but a leader's got to be thinking further out. A leader's got to be thinking strategically. A leader's got to have high aim vision. Theodore Hesburgh, former president of Notre Dame University, said the first job of a leader is to inspire hope. And I think perhaps more than ever before in 2023, Greg, you realize it's been 1,000 days, more than 1,000 days since the world shut down. And when it reopened, it has reopened differently. And I think the last 3 years have been more than 10 years of change crammed into 1,000 days. And part of what our team members need is hope and belief in the future. Part of what your agents need to be giving to their team members, and part of what your business leaders need to be giving to the admins underneath them and their clients as well, is a belief that we are going to be able to weather the future. We don't know what's coming. There are storm clouds on the horizon, but a leader has high aim vision. There's probably some military analogies that you've been sharing and could share about that. But one of the things that I observed in all of the good leaders that I was interviewing and reading about and working with is they got their eyes up. They were leaders of conviction. They believed in the future. Any questions about that or insights from your perspective before we dive into number 2?
So, no, I agree with what you're saying. When it comes to on a military perspective, we're looking at the difference between like a strategic towards versus like an organizational
Yeah.
leader, or tactical to strategic leader. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So whereas like the tactical leader was like that lower base leader is more kind of like maybe looking the month out. That's
Yeah.
that's a baby leader.
Right.
When you're looking at a strategic leader and you're looking at a much larger organization and you're putting a lot of pieces in play, it's because you're looking so far out
Yeah.
at what every single piece has
Exactly.
to do
Exactly.
and how you're structuring your training regimen for the next 12 months for something that's coming 18 months down the road or
Yeah.
2 years down the road. And having that strategic vision is very important, especially as a leader. If and I don't care what level you're at, honestly, like if you're a brand new entrepreneur and you're starting to develop your company, you're starting to build your team, you should have a strategic vision for where you want your team to
Yeah.
be within the
Yeah.
next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly right. And then if we flip over to, because part of what you're so passionate about, I've seen in your material is not just organizational leadership, but becoming the person you should be. And one of the things, as we think about the personal side of leading well, as we take a look at people that are practicing this conviction, these are the ones that see the cup as half full. These are the ones that wake up in the morning with the spring in their step. These are the ones that have the disciplines of a daily rhythm that gives them purpose and focus. And so they're always kind of leaning in. As you look at some of your best people, and I look at some of my best people, I see people who ask forgiveness afterwards instead of permission ahead of time, because they're people of conviction. They're pushing forward in their personal life, in their personal attitudes, and also with the teams that they lead. And so this whole area of conviction, vision, the ability to be strategic. I mean, some of it is the ability that good leaders have to do strategic planning. Some of the small business teams that you work with, they need to be doing those 3 and 5 year strategic plans. They also need to be recognizing that we live in a volatile time and we are going to fail fast and fix. We're going to have confident uncertainty in the midst of times of uncertainty. We're going to be leaning forward with what we do. Show me an organized, disciplined person who's got their eyes up, and I'll tell you, this is a person that has the potential to grow into a leader of conviction.
yeah, I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
That's a
Some
great
of the,
way. It's a great way. I've never thought of conviction that way in terms of they have that positive kind of like, let's move
yeah,
forward, let's drive forward. Let's
yeah,
just let's act. And if we have to like fix it on the back end, we can
yeah,
like, but let's move out
yeah.
first. I like that.
Well, I remember when we shut my wife and I on a series of retail businesses, and when we had to close the doors, 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago to this week, when you and I are interviewing on this podcast, when we had to close down, I started holding daily meetings at first with our management team, and in some respects, those daily meetings were simply a chance for each one of us to exhale with each other. We did that reality check of building strong empathetic links with each other. Sometimes we didn't have any agenda items. Other times we talked a lot about plans that we needed to implement, and we held them with an open hand because the rules were changing daily, if not weekly, in terms of what was appropriate in a retail environment and what wasn't appropriate. But the key to our success, and we had good success when we reopened, and continue to have good success. And I believe part of it was I had a team of people who leaned in, who believed there was a future and recognized we're going to have to be flexible. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we're not sitting on our heels waiting for somebody else to tell us. That's the inside of a person of conviction, is they're just going to lean forward. So I don't know too many good leaders that are not leaders of conviction. And you mentioned a minute ago, Greg, I want to make a distinction. It's not really management or leadership. Good leaders manage well. Managers have leadership built inside of them. But if we could, for our time together, talk about management as the tactical doing of what's in front of you, and leadership as the being of filling the void to allow the doing to be done with excellence. In some respects,
I
they're not.
refer to the art and science. It's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
similar.
that's
Like
a good way.
management's more the science,
Right.
the facts, the figures, the data, all that.
Yeah.
Leadership's more of the art.
Yeah.
of how you like
So
inspire, influence, raise up.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was the first thing I observed. And again, none of this is brand new stuff. It's just a simple way to organize it. If you're going to grow into a high performing leader, you recognize I've got to be thinking out. I've got to
Yeah.
demonstrate that I'm a person of conviction. I've got to have a spring in my step, be leaning forward. I've got to get my eyes up and be thinking about implications. Don't have to be right. In a world full of change like we live in right now, the best leaders are they're practicing their own version of that agile software sprint where we fail fast and fix. But you got to be a person of conviction. And then
Yeah.
the second one that I observed, and I particularly have seen it demonstrated on some of your team members as I was spending some time in your website, this whole area of competence, of the ability to execute and get other people to execute, the execution component. A leader knows how to get stuff done and knows how to empower their people to get stuff done. So things like managing risk. What was Colin Powell's famous quote during Desert Storm? A battlefield leader needs to make decisions, life and death decisions, with only 60% of the information that they wish they had, but you've still got to have your team execute. When I look at good leaders, and again, I work in the nonprofit space, I own my own businesses, I work in government space some, I work in Fortune 500 and SMBs. There is a common distinguishing factor. The best managers I work with are leaders who help their teams get stuff done. They just get stuff done. It's some respects like your t-shirt, right? Where set goals, crush them, repeat. Tomorrow, set goals, crush them, repeat. That
Yeah.
ability to execute.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that nothing inspires your team to actually do the work more than you just doing the work.
Yeah.
It starts with you.
Yeah.
It starts with you being able to wake up and like do the job and do it effectively and take on extra tasks to teach and train and coach and recruit and build the business, administrative practices, and like doing the annual reports for your business and everything that comes with it, right? All that stuff.
Yeah.
And still doing those basic tasks that you're trying to get your team to do.
Yeah. Well,
You're not above it.
and so, as we think about the personal side of that, the top performers that you and I work with regularly, they've got their daily rhythms down, right? They manage some type of to-do list. They're on top of their calendar. Those simple blocking and tackling of, hey, am I available when I said I was going to be available? And did I get done what I said I was going to get done before the meeting instead of apologizing in the meeting? Do I model that behavior because it's built inside of me? And you and I could probably talk for a long time about like morning disciplines and how do you start your day right so that you have a highly productive day. But then also when you're leading a team, there's some execution realities that sit on your shoulders that don't sit on your team members' shoulders. You mentioned some of them, the being a step ahead, the strategic planning, thinking about budget stuff, the evaluation of risk in 2023 and beyond, and recognizing we're in uncharted territory where one day there seems to be 80% of the indicators are thumbs up, and the next day 80% of the indicators are thumbs down, and supply chain constraints and the great resignation followed by the work from home movement and all of these uncertainties. Leaders still have to be able to perform and get their teams to perform in a way that brings things home at the end of the day, that ability to execute a high degree of competence.
Yeah. And I love both of these so far, honestly.
Yeah. Well,
you have a unique way of breaking them down and talking about them at a high level that I'm like, I'm picking up what you're putting down, Dr. Andy.
so, Greg, if I've added anything to the language of leadership, it's just that I'm a pretty simple guy. Yeah. And there are literally thousands and thousands of leadership books. If people could see your library, if people could see my library, they are filled with books from Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism and Jesus Christ up to the books that the Wall Street Journal was recommending last quarter on leadership. There's not a loss for people talking about leadership, but this grid that you said you're liking to get your hands around, I'm a simple guy, Greg, I just got to be able to understand it pretty simply. And so conviction and competence, and then the one that you won't be surprised about at all, that probably disqualifies more leaders when they lack it quicker than anything else, is the issue of character. And
Yeah.
you know, I think we've both probably shared that quote. You'll never be a better leader than you are a person. Gosh, Greg, I remember I was working with a Fortune 500 technology company, gosh, 10 years ago now, as I was still trying to formulate all of this into a simple matrix that I could grab hold of. I've got about 15 top performing salespeople in a room where we're reviewing some sales performance stuff, and I'm training them on some of the very same things you train some of your people on in terms of sales excellence and open-ended questions and leaning into the client, understanding client needs, things like that. The managers were in the back of the room on their laptops. And one, that's the wrong model for a manager. You're supposed to be engaged with your people when you're doing some of this, but I went through an exercise where I did that simple acronym that selling 101, WIFM, WIFM, what's in it from me, from the client or customer's perspective. And I wrote WIFM up on the flip chart. And the manager, who was sitting in the back of the room, half paying attention, half on his laptop, looked up at that point and laughed. And I wasn't quite sure what was going on. He whispered to the person sitting next to him, and then, Greg, I saw a wave of what I recognized was ultimately distaste, discomfort, lack of trust. Here's what came out. I saw a manager lose their ability to lead just like that. There was, at that point, there was a website that this manager was going on that had initials similar to WIFM, and it came out that he was watching stuff in secret that he thought nobody would know about. And when it came out, well, Greg, he lost the ability to lead that afternoon in that workshop because of a character flaw that he thought was a hidden character flaw. So, in fact, in some of my training and speaking, I talk about character black holes. If you're a science bug at all, or if you got anybody on your podcast that's into interstellar space, they know what a interstellar black hole is. It's a star that collapses up upon itself so strongly that the gravity is so powerful, even light can't escape. And so if light can't escape, how do the telescopes even see a black hole 10 million miles away? Well, they see it by its influence around it. And in some respects, that afternoon, that manager's character flaw came out in ways that he never thought it would come out, and he lost the ability to lead right then and right there. Other orientedness, fair-mindedness, honest, integrity, the things that make you and me good people at the end of the day are also what will be part of our leadership legacy. That third leadership necessity, and perhaps the most important one, is this whole area of character.
Yes. I saw this a lot. This happens a lot in the military, right? And you'll have somebody that has the respect or has the clout, the bona fides from their previous assignments or their previous achievements that they've had within previous positions.
Yeah.
And then you'll find out something that they did something. It was on off-duty hours, right? And it was like, well, they weren't, and it wasn't in line of duty. But as officers, we were very much held like to the standard of you are an officer 24/7. 24/7. Like, and so I like when I was in the military, we saw it as like we lost our freedom. Because I couldn't do things. I couldn't like post something stupid on Instagram, or back then it wasn't as big. But Facebook was starting to get big. But I couldn't have a Facebook filled with like crazy stuff because it would be seen negatively on my unit, the military, everything, because I was connected to all of it.
Exactly.
And you have to learn to kind of. Yeah. People think, well, I want to express myself. It's like, yeah, but when you become a leader and you're trying to like inspire people, you lose the ability to be to do those kind of
Yeah.
crazy wild things, which sometimes you never know. It might be something small that actually like that gets people to lose that trust
Yeah.
and that respect in you. It could be something that's massive that you think is hidden, like kind of like with your
Yeah.
example that you had.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing is, it's not that leaders shouldn't be emotional. It's not that leaders shouldn't get angry or be disappointed or frustrated.
Yeah.
In some respects, the further you grow in leadership, the smaller the amplitude should be between your good days and your bad days and your highlights and your lowlights, and using judgment, and really, an old word that we don't use very much anymore, but bringing wisdom to the table, just like you were talking about. In some respects, if you've got an agent who's got somebody working for them 9 to 5, that person has no rights to any time after 5 o'clock. But if the person in that position wants to grow in their leadership, they're going to recognize, hey, my life outside work and my life inside work need to be congruous, or there's going to be a disconnect at some point. And you highlighted it. It's changed so much even in the last just 3 years, but the whole advent of 24/7 social media with cameras everywhere, and internet ubiquitous at this point. There are not very many secrets that don't come out anymore. And so you and I need to be working on the inner person. Now, that doesn't mean any of us has to be perfect. One of the strengths of a high performing leader is they own their own mistakes. In fact, they own mistakes even at times when it's not fully their mistake. They apologize for things they don't need to apologize for, because they're willing to have that humble approach to leadership. It's not about me, it's about others. Again, fair-mindedness, character, honesty, other-orientedness, the character of a leader. At the end of the day, people are going to follow a person of character. Stephen Covey said it 25 years ago, people join organizations for the job, they leave because of their boss. And you and I need to be people of character. Again, not perfect. In fact, there's a model of the flawed leader that brings vulnerability and actually makes their team stronger, because they are transparent about some of their weaknesses, but they don't cover them up. That's the point. They don't cover them up. So we've got conviction, we've got competence, we've got character, and we could probably give these all different words, Greg. I simply found a simple construct for me so that I can remember it. I will tell you the fourth thing that I observed. It took me a long time to really articulate what I was seeing, but I knew there was more than just what we've been talking about for the last 25 minutes. And finally, probably maybe 2 years ago, I came across an old word that really captured my new understanding of what I was observing. And it's the word covenant. Covenant's kind of an old-fashioned word. We don't use it very much, but you and I both live in Texas. Let me use an example from here in Texas. If somebody's going to get married in Texas, you obviously assume there's love and affection. There's the exchange of vows of commitment and the whole husband and wife until death do us part, and all of the excitement around the romance of that. I've found my life partner, and so there's the personal side of a marriage here in the state of Texas. But if any of your listeners got married in this state, and probably a bunch of other states, there's also a legal document that gets signed by the officiant and submitted to the state of Texas and becomes a recorded legal document. There's a formal recognition of this relationship as well. And indeed, if someone says, you know what, I made a mistake and I need to exit this relationship, they have to go through a formal process of divorce. So there's the personal side, there's also the relationship side. And when I was observing good leaders who were in their zone doing well, I saw them wrestling with, how do I serve my organization well? How do I make sure we're fulfilling our mission? How do I make sure our P&L makes sense and our balance sheet is growing? How do I make sure that we get to rinse and repeat next year? How do I manage the stewardship of my business And how do I serve my people well? How do I take care of them? And particularly in the last 3 years, Greg, I think the whole need of our employees and our team members has been brought to work greater than ever before. And, I suspect you and I are being broadcast into some places where, some of the people at the end of this camera, if they could say, yeah, we ended up covering that person's paycheck for 6 weeks, even though they couldn't come in because there was stuff going on at home. Nobody needed to know about it. It was just the right thing to do. That's that servanthood side of things, the balance, the tension that I see every good leader. They don't focus so much on their people that they don't care about the organization, but it's not black and white about the organization. There is a tension and a balance of this personal and this formal. And the best word I could put around it was the covenant responsibility that a leader has to serve their organization, serve their people, serve their mission well.
That's so great.
Yeah.
The way that I'm telling you, Dr. Andy, the way that you explain things and like the way that your mind works, like I was thinking just a simple covenant. Hey, it was just an agreement, right? But it's not. It's almost like the relationship that leader is making with the organization and with the people and balancing both of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't like the word balancing. I like harmony.
Good.
And the harmony between the two, because it will always ebb and flow.
Yeah.
It's not always going to be right down the middle, where balance is very indicative of like
One
trying
or the
to,
other. Yeah.
it's one or the other. You're trying to like balance the scales. You're trying to resist change. You're trying to keep it even. Whereas harmony, there's going to be times where you're going to have to go more towards the organization and your duties to the organization. And then there's going to be times where you're going to be like, hey, we got to take care of these people.
Yeah.
And screw the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Screw the money. We got to take care of these people. So it's going to ebb and flow.
Yeah. Well, I love your insight around harmony. I talk about the tension because it's the same thing. It doesn't go away, but probably harmony is a strong word as well, because harmony carries with it the same idea of covenant, where there's a commitment to make it work. Right.
Yeah.
And again, Greg, you could tell some stories. I could tell some stories where probably we got played. We took care of somebody, and then we found out they had a gig income that they were pulling other times when they weren't coming into the office, and they're abusing the privilege we've given them.
Yeah.
We could both tell stories of that, I'm sure, where we fell off the one side too far. And probably other times, particularly, I suspect, earlier in your career, earlier in my career, things seemed more black and white. And it's, it's in the policy manual, and 3 strikes and you're out. And I think as you mature as a leader, you realize this harmony that I've got to be seeking, I never quite get right. It's tough, right? And I think it's particularly tough in a post-COVID, post-societal upheaval, post-governmental change, post the days that we live in right now. We know, you and I are both on LinkedIn a lot. We see it. I feel like every third article on LinkedIn, every third blog that's put up is, you've got to love your people at work. And I get it. And I fully support that. Love is a verb. It's not a noun. I need to do the best things on behalf of my team. I have no trouble saying I want to love my employees. And I also have a responsibility to make sure we're still in business next year. I can't pay what they say they deserve to be paid, because it's not financially viable long term when all of my costs are going up. And there's that tension and harmony that you and I as leaders, I think we've got to wrestle with it. I don't think it'll ever go away. I think the challenge of it is, how do we demonstrate covenant? How do we have a formal arrangement that also has a personal side? So
that's a challenge. That is a true leadership challenge.
Yeah, it really is. And it doesn't go away. It's not like, good, let's do a case study on this. Let's get it published. Let's think we'll have the answer.
So in the military, everything, if you didn't have a direct answer, it was always situationally dependent.
Yeah.
We would just say MET TC. That was just that was like in the Army, our way of saying it depends on the situation, right? And so, because it was like it depended on the mission, depended on the enemies, the troops, the terrain, the time, the civilians that were on the battlefield. So
Yeah.
all those things, like depending upon those situations,
Yeah.
well, that's going to depict how we act, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the decision we make. And I think that's a very similar. That's a very similar concept and construct that we're talking about here with covenant, where it's like, hey, there are going to be times that we can't it's you can't make a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, you just don't know. Well, and there will be times when you look back and you say, I don't know if I made the right decision,
Yeah.
but I made the best decision I could at that point. And that employee hated me as I showed him the door, or that employee took me for $30,000 because I gave them one too many times. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. You need to get right. It's your it's that, it's probably the harmony of a jazz musician where they never play the same piece of music twice the same way. Right?
Yeah. And here's here's the thing is that you almost don't want to let it jade you, right? So let's say that you go out on a limb and you really like you go out and do the extra effort and the leadership love and all that stuff for one of your employees or one of the people on your team, one of your team members, and then they end up hoodwinking you and taking you for all that money or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You then don't want to turn around and be like, well, I'm never helping anybody again.
No, that's right.
I'm gonna put this in place so it never happens to me again.
Yeah.
That's the surefire way to start distancing and creating a chasm between your culture and your climate of your organization and what you say, the kind of person you're going to lead, and the kind of organization you are, and how you interact with each other, and what the people actually feel, right? And it will create, which causes psychological fear and the leadership. And so it's important to like not let it jade you.
No,
which is hard. Here's what's crazy is that like this covenant is so profound. This is probably the most difficult part of leadership.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, when I finally got my hands around it, because 5 years ago I was still trying to find the fourth C, and I was talking about consistency, and I was talking about communication, but those were things you did. Yeah. This concept of covenant, as you've alluded to, Greg, it's really as much about who you are as a leader as what you do, and you can't get jaded. That's why that old little kid story, the Velveteen Rabbit, that we read to our children when they were 2 and 3 years old, about this pristine new pretty little Velveteen Rabbit who becomes the favorite rabbit, the stuffed animal of this little child. And because they're the favorite stuffed animal, they get drug everywhere, and then an eye falls off and an ear gets torn, and then as they're reflecting in the playpen with some of the other stuffed animals late in life, part of what they say is, when you really become a true Velveteen Rabbit, you realize some of that stuff doesn't matter as much anymore. And if you and I are going to be good leaders, part of it means it's not about us anymore. Even though, 30 minutes ago I said you've got to be a person of conviction who's looking toward the future, who's leading the charge. You're still not leading the charge because it's about you. You're leading the charge because it's in the best interest of the organization, of the clients you serve, of the mission that you're trying to accomplish. It's not about you. Yeah. And that's, I think, the mature harmony that needs to happen in the life of a leader. So we've got conviction, we've got competence, we've got character. But I would echo with you. I think they're all woven together. I know they're all woven together. But I think this concept of covenant, particularly in the world that we live in today, with all of the tensions that our clients and our team members have to deal with, it is harder and harder for you and me as leaders. This is the area we've got to focus in. How do I practice? And the language I've borrowed from such good literature over the years, the language I've borrowed is, how do we balance stewardship of the organization I lead with servanthood of the people that I lead? And so, again, knowing your military background, the leaders eat last. You're the bottom of the pyramid. You're not the top of the pyramid. All of that is a reflection of you understanding the covenant relationship you have with the people that you serve. This is heavy stuff. This is not not to be moved into lightly. That's why, anybody that thinks leadership is easy and it's a fun dance in the park, they're not really leading yet. They're not really leading yet.
Here's a case in point. As you astutely mentioned at the beginning, is that there's nothing new to leadership since the time of Marcus Aurelius or Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
However, how many leadership masters exist?
Yeah. Yeah.
Zero, because it's just a lifelong journey in learning. It's like people are just further ahead on the trail. That's it.
Yeah.
And once you decide to go on the trail, it's a constant lifelong learning and growing, experiencing. There is no perfect right or wrong, left or right, black, white. It doesn't exist.
Well, and that's why I think it comes back to what you said a few minutes ago. You can't become jaded about that. You and I are never going to get it right.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we don't have to get up the next morning and still get after it. It's fail fast and fall forward and recognize, man, I was too harsh over here. I was too generous over here. Next time I'm going to apply a little bit different matrix, and I'm going to learn and move forward together and slowly become a velveteen leadership rabbit in some respects.
That is great. So, Dr. Andy, this has been fantastic, and I love the 4 C's. When does this book come out?
Well, hopefully fourth quarter. I've got a couple of big projects that put me a little bit behind on my writing, but I'll make sure that I keep you up to date on it. There'll be a free copy headed north from Austin to Dallas. One of my
I would love that
copies. But I mean, I knew this was going to happen because as I've captured these 4 C's, there is nothing new in what I've said to you. It's just a simple construct. Somebody wants to know if they're not just a manager, if they're becoming a high performing leader. Hear what I said, becoming. To your point, nobody ever fully arrives. But if you want to know if you're becoming a high performing leader, are you growing in your ability to be strategic, in conviction, having your eyes up? Are you helping your team execute? Are you a person of competence personally who's got their disciplines down and then knows how to lead teams well? Are you a person rich in character who doesn't have any interstellar black holes that are going to trip up your ability to influence others? And do you balance this stewardship and servanthood of covenant? If you're working in those 4 areas, that's the confidence I have now as I stand in front of leaders is I know what it takes. If you are wrestling in these 4 areas, you are on the path to becoming a high performing leader. So that's the grid. I will be glad to get you a copy of the book as soon as it comes out, Greg. And
I would love it.
We have enjoyed our conversation. I knew as soon as you and I started corresponding together and you were looking at my stuff and I was looking at your stuff, I thought, yeah, I'm going to have some things to say. He's already thought about this stuff, though. We're just going to have a conversation. This is good.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this has been one of my favorite leadership conversations I've had on the podcast, period. The way that you can explain things and break it down and the way that your mind works around these 4 C's, I can tell you have a lot of experience in witnessing, observing, experiencing yourself, and then also teaching and coaching along the way. So it's been phenomenal. Good. If anyone's listening to this and they're like, man, I like Dr. Andy too. I want to learn more about him. What's the best place to follow, connect with you, learn more?
So a couple of things. One, I've got an offer for them that if they simply go to leadershipmaterials.com, part of our leadership, an important part of our leadership, Greg, and you demonstrate this all the time because you're such a powerful communicator. Every one of us who leads a team or desires to lead a team, Chief Communication Officer is part of our title. Yeah. And there are 3 conversations every leader needs to have. You need to have the coaching conversation. You need to have the hard conversation when performance is being missed on an ongoing basis. And then you need to have the affirmation conversation, that 5-to-1 deposit of people need more positives in them. And I've got a little ebook, a little 8-page ebook that goes over each one of those with a couple of worksheets and some sample questions and things. So if they simply go to Leadership Materials, they give me their email address. They'll also end up therefore being on the list if they want to opt in, and they'll get my monthly blog. Otherwise, it's just Neillie Leadership. You pronounced it correctly. My last name is spelled a little challengingly, Neillie, simply NeillieLeadership.com will take me to their website. And like you, I post regularly. I'm typically putting out a blog once a month, at least, on leadership stuff. Like you, I'm a big fitness guy, and a lot of my leadership principles come out of the CrossFit gym that I'm a member of. So we talk a lot about disciplines, personal disciplines that lead to leadership effectiveness as well. So yeah,
Absolutely.
leadershipmaterials.com or neillieleadership.com will get them there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Andy Neillie. It was a pleasure having you come on as a guest host with the
You bet. Let's do this again at some point in the future, Greg. You were great to
definitely.
talk with.
I would love to. Maybe like pre your book
Oh,
releasing,
that'd be
right?
fun. That'd be
That'd be
fun.
great. We talk about once it's done, like how do
Yeah.
you feel?
Yeah.
Last question I ask all my guests. You have the opportunity to sit and have spend time with, break bread with, whatever you want to do, learn from 3 individuals, anyone in history, living or deceased. Who would those 3 be and why?
Well, my faith is really important to me. I look toward to the day when I can sit with Jesus Christ and have that conversation. Probably the Apostle Paul, because he did a complete mindset shift and moved from being a very autocratic leader to being the type of leader we've talked about. And then, I'm a huge fan of Winston Churchill, a rascal of a leader who was actually a really bad leader. Again, I would assume, Greg, you know the military history. He was basically removed from any positions of influence. But he was the voice that needed to be heard at that point in time. So I'd probably want to grab a brandy and cigar, I think is what he would want to sit down with probably and have a long conversation about leadership communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Those are all 3 great ones. I've never heard the Apostle Paul. Actually, I don't think that we've had Winston Churchill was one either.
Oh, all right. Well,
those are 2 unique
those are
ones.
2 great guys. And in some respects, both of them, because they both were just kind of harsh, mean-spirited, black and white guys early in their careers, and then they learned from their mistakes and they mellowed. And as a result, the Apostle Paul and the advent of Christianity has changed the world, and we are living in a free world today, partly because of the World War II success that Winston Churchill invested into his small island and then all of the free world. So,
yes,
a couple of rascals who became velveteen rabbits, probably.
and I think that the takeaway for that is that no matter where you are at the leadership journey, no matter what kind of personality you is that over time, as you make these mistakes and you learn and you kind of adjust fire, you get better and better. Like you could still be remarkable for something. You can get fired from a leadership job. Doesn't mean you're a terrible leader for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So
some of the best lessons you'll ever learn are the lessons that you made by making mistakes. So
absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And for those of you listening, this has been a value-packed episode. I need you to do me a favor. I need you to share this content with somebody else that can also learn from it. Someone that can take these 4 C's away and apply it to their leadership strategy. Someone that can actually get some of the free information from Dr. Andy from the website in order to apply and help them. Just by you sharing, you may be able to impact another organization's future. Take 60 seconds to rate, review, subscribe, share, but it means the world to us. This has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time, we'll see you.